Hey, how's it going out there, everyone? This is W.F.S, and I want to talk to you today about Strange New Worlds, Star Trek, and the franchise itself, and where Strange New Worlds can take it from this point. You know, if you've watched my channel before, then you know that I've had both good and bad things to say about this series. And I know lately I've been very critical of it because there are certain things about this series that really bothers me, and I'm not afraid to admit it. And at the same time, I'm also not afraid to admit that there are some things about it that I do like. But now that the series or the season has ended, and with the writer's strike going on, the actor's strike going on, and really we don't know when this thing is going to end. But now that the strike is going on, I think it's safe to say that we can talk about things and stories and articles that have come out about this series, and also a little theory that I have about it and the possible damage that's being done. So before we get into it, I want to thank all of you who have subscribed to the channel. It is greatly appreciated. I really would like to try and get this channel, the subscriber count, up even more if possible. I'm working on trying to improve the way I present my content, so I hope you're patient with me, and until I can get those bugs worked out, I hope you enjoy what I have created for you. And for right now, let's get into this little video here. As I said, there are things about Strange New Worlds that I like, and there are things about it I don't. And unfortunately, the bad things are making it really, really difficult for me to want to promote the show. And I'm going to get into that and how I believe, even though I don't think the writers or the showrunners are doing this on purpose. I don't really think they're going into Star Trek and saying, hey, we've got our show. Let's see if we can tear apart everything else that's Star Trek and make everyone come over to us. I know there are people out there who are just hating on it just because it's not exactly following the method and storyline of the original Star Trek, and everything has to evolve. Characters have to grow. I get all that. But there also has to be respect, and that's where I'm concerned. But as I said, let's get into the video and I will talk to you about all these things. Let's start off with some positives. Subspace Rhapsody, I'm going to have to say, is one of, if not my favorite episode in this season. No one, if anyone had ever told me that Star Trek would ever be able to perform a musical, I would have said, you're out of your minds. There's no way that you could make it work. And as improbable as the concept was, bravo to the showrunners, bravo to the cast, bravo to the composers. This episode was brilliant. And I know I've watched other people out there jump right on and rip it apart. It was absurd. It was ludicrous. It was ridiculous. Any other negative comment about this episode, they could find it. They did. But for me, this was amazing to watch. I could not believe how well this was executed. And for the showrunners of it, again, bravo. And to the cast, again, bravo. It was just, I loved it. Under the Cloak of War happens to be another well done episode. I actually really liked it. It did pose some questions for me, though, when it comes to Klingons and their history, and when it comes to Stubble. Like, he turned his back on the Klingons. Does that mean he's still going to Stubble? Or is he going to be among the honored dead? Or is he going to be with the unworthy? That's a very interesting question I have to ask about this one. It also brings about the scars of war, the battles, the things that we take with us after epic tragedies such as war. The secrets we keep, the traumas that we deal with, the inner demons that we have to fight. I thought this was a well done episode. I was quite happy with it. Okay, be honest about this one. Did anyone, when they first heard about the idea of Lower Decks and Strange New World, a crossover episode, did anyone honestly think that this thing was going to be anything more than ridiculous? I apologize. I completely apologize for it. They did so well blending this thing together. I could not believe for 1 second that this merging of an animated series with a live action did so well. But I was blown away by how well it worked. Mariner and Boiler interacting with the Enterprise crew and how annoying they are and how much they got on everyone's nerves. It just worked. I loved it. I really did. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about the positives coming out of this second season, but unfortunately now we have to talk about some other things, such as the negatives and the damage that possibly Strange New Worlds is causing to the entire franchise. And I'm going to start off with a little theory that I think has been out there, but some have argued differently. I'm going to come up with the idea, my friends, that Strange New Worlds is in a different timeline. It just has to be, because some of the things that are going on, some of the characters that they are interacting with, they don't belong. Events in this timeline, events on this show, do not or should not be happening. So therefore, I'm going to present the idea that this is nothing more than an alternate timeline. Because if it is not an alternate timeline, then the damage that's being done is unbelievable to the franchise. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so why do I believe that Strange New Worlds is in an alternate timeline? Because of a couple of things. Number one, let's take a look at the Kelvin timeline and the crew of the Enterprise in those feature films. If Strange New Worlds is in the original timeline of Kirk and Spock and the original series, then the Kelvin timeline never happened. All the events in those movies never happened. So that part of the franchise, the Kelvin timeline movies, doesn't exist anymore. The movies are irrelevant. So if the Kelvin timeline doesn't exist anymore, then that means the timeline has been restored. No sun went nova or supernova threatening to destroy the entire galaxy, forcing Spock and the Vulcans to create a red matter device which would send Nero back in time to destroy the Kelvin, which would kill off the Kelvin timeline. At the same time, if we're still talking about that supernova and the Kelvin timeline, and what about Picard Season 1? That whole premise of that season was based on the fact that a star exploded and sent a massive supernova spiraling toward Romulus that Picard had to help evacuate. And if it wasn't for that supernova, Spock wouldn't have gone back in time, Nero wouldn't have gone back in time, and changed the whole timeline to the Kelvin timeline. So my question is, if all of that happened, does that change even Picard?
Sam!
Jimmy, welcome to the Enterprise.
All right, so let's get back to the original supposed timeline and take a look at this point in the Strange New Worlds history, Lieutenant Kirk, who is just about to be promoted to first officer of the Farragut. In this episode, Lost in Translation, the Enterprise and the Farragut are at a Stellan nursery trying to help a refinery get online so they can process deuterium for the ships. It's gasoline for the starships. And at this point in Star Trek is when they're going to try and blend Kirk into the episodes here. Also in this episode, Captain Pike has become a temporary fleet captain in order to process this refinery. 2 ships apparently in this episode makes you a fleet captain. If you've been given command of the mission and there are 2 ships, you're a fleet captain. And as I said at the beginning of this video, or at the beginning of this episode, Pike has been promoted temporarily to a fleet captain because he's responsible for 2 ships. But there's a problem with this.
You ever met Chris Pike?
We met when he was promoted to fleet captain.
About your age.
Big, handsome man, vital, active.
I took over the Enterprise from Spock. Served with him for several years.
11 years, 4 months, 5 days.
Captain Kirk first met Captain Pike when Pike was promoted to fleet captain, and Kirk took command of the Enterprise from him. It doesn't say that he was temporarily promoted, because, again, the problem we have here is, Kirk even said it, he met Pike when he was promoted to fleet captain, and he took command of the Enterprise from him. In Strange New Worlds, Kirk beams aboard as a lieutenant who's about to be promoted to first officer on the Farragut, not to get command of the Enterprise from Pike, and Pike was not it wasn't a temporary promotion for Pike. And at the same time, in Strange New Worlds, Kirk will appear at least in one more episode of the season, Subspace Rhapsody. Okay, for the final part of this video, I want to talk about the final episode of Season 2, Hegemony, and how the Gorn have been built up to be the major villain of this series and of this season. We heard stories about how they were building up a massive fleet at the edge or on the other side of the Federation territory. And then we come up to Hegemony, where the Federation or some kind of group is building a colony just outside Federation space. And the Gorn are the villains of this episode. They attack the planet and they just leave so much devastation. But here's the problem with it. See, the problem with making the Gorn the enemy of Strange New Worlds is it completely ignores and destroys one of the coolest episodes that come from the original series, Arena, which is where we are introduced to the Gorn. Anyone who's new to the series and the franchise will look back on the original series and say that it doesn't make any sense, because the Enterprise is beaming down a crew to Cestus 3 invited by the Commodore to explain a tactical situation, but when they get there, the Cestus 3 has already been destroyed. The Gorn set them up and was trying to take them out. Kirk and crew are able to beam back to the ship and hunt down the Gorn, at least start a pursuit. The Metrons interfere with the pursuit of the Gorn and cause Kirk and the captain of the Gorn vessel to battle each other to the death. Kirk and crew and the Federation had never heard of the Gorn until the attack on Cestus 3 and until the Metrons forced the encounter between Kirk and the commander of the Gorn ship. So, now the argument I'm making here is, now that Strange New Worlds has decided to make the Gorn the villains of this entire series, it completely ruins the Arena. It doesn't make any sense. So, from this point on, the episode Arena is irrelevant. It doesn't work anymore. Anyone who's new to Star Trek will come along, watch Strange New Worlds, and then decide to look back on the original series, come up to this episode and say, wait a minute, I thought we were already at war with the Gorn. How did we just meet them now? The violations of history in Star Trek Strange New Worlds continues, and it appears that the showrunners for Strange New Worlds are not done taking characters from the original series and bringing them over to Strange New Worlds. When the actors' strike is settled and the writer's strike is settled, according to an article here, Strange New Worlds showrunners tease more returning TOS characters for Star Trek Strange New Worlds. In other words, they plan to bring more characters from the original series over to Strange New Worlds. So who knows what more changes they are going to make. Okay, so as I said before, I like Strange New Worlds for some of the stories it has, but the continuous carefree approach to the classic characters and how they're blending them into the series and how they are changing the history. They're going to argue with you that they are doing it to fix continuity problems. But I am telling you right now, they are damaging the franchise if they do not be more careful. Who knows what other franchise series, what other episodes in those series will become pointless because Strange New Worlds is tinkering with the history of Star Trek. I'm going to end the video right here, but I would love to hear your thoughts and comments on this. Tell me what you think about this. Do you think the Arena episode is still relevant? Do you think that they're doing okay with the Kirk character? After all, like I said before, James Kirk mentioned that he met Pike and that he was promoted. When Pike was promoted to fleet captain, Kirk got command of the Enterprise. That is not what happened and is happening in Strange New Worlds. So tell me what you think. I want to hear your comments. Let me know. And until the next time, my friends, God bless.